Welcome to a new video. In this one, we're going to be taking our Django and React application live, and the service we're going to be using to do this is called Heroku. Now, this isn't a paid video for the service of Heroku. This is purely just on me going out and finding what the easiest way is to actually achieve this, and after getting this to work, which took about maybe 30 minutes, I figured this is probably the easiest way to do it, or at least one of the easiest ways to do it. So this video is purely going to focus on getting our Django React application that we've been working with in this tutorial series up and running, and it's actually really simple. So without further ado, let's get started. To get started, what I'm just going to do is just go into a browser, and what you're going to want to do is create a Heroku account. So if you just search for Heroku, then it's going to bring up your usual stuff. Just go to dashboard.heroku.com, and I'm already logged in, but you'll then need to create your account. And once you get to this page here, it's going to, well, you're not going to have any apps just yet, and that's what you need to do. You need to create a new app. So I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to leave my region as United States, and the app name I'm just going to call just Django React Django app, something like that. And okay, we see that that's available. Cool. So we click create app, and there we go. So it brings us to this page, and it's already on the deploy tab where it's talking about this installing the Heroku CLI. So this is basically short for the command line interface, and in my experience it's really easy and it works really well. So that's what we're going to do. You're going to need to install this. So depending on your machine that you're using, it's going to be slightly different. So on this page, just scroll down a little bit, and if you're using Mac, you can do this with Brew. That's actually how I installed it. Otherwise you can use the installer, or if you're on Windows, just use the installer. It's pretty straightforward. So once you've gone through that and you've got it installed, then if we come back in here, it's just going to require you to call this Heroku Login. So that you can do inside a terminal. You just say Heroku Login, and then once you do that, it's going to ask you for your credentials. I'm already logged in though, so I'm not going to actually go ahead and log in again, but it's going to ask you for your Heroku profile details, and then you just log in as per usual. And then all you need to do is just create a Git repository with Git in it. So I'm actually just going to get our DJ React repository from GitHub. So if you want to just follow along with this directly, then just copy this URL, and I'm actually going to go here into this terminal. I've got it empty at the moment, and I'm going to initialize it. So we'll say git init. And so we just need to clone into this by saying, first initialize it as a repository, and then just say git clone that URL. So this will clone us into that repository. And now if I just clear everything out, we can then remove the actual git contents of this folder by just saying rm-rf.git, and that should remove the Git repository from it. And so if we just check the instructions here, so let's just get this back here. So we changed into that project, type git init. So let's just make sure that it is a Git repository. So we do that, and then we just say Heroku Git Remote, add this as the remote origin. Now, if you've created your app, then this part here is going to be unique to your app. So it's not going to be the same mine and yours. So we just say add that, and then we see that that's been set. So it's set the remote origin to Heroku, and there you can see the URL for that Git repository. And then we just need to add the contents of this actual application, and I'm going to open it in Visual Studio Code now so we can work in here. Okay, so here we've got it open in Visual Studio Code, and what we need to do before adding all the contents and committing it, we actually need to tell Heroku what the build packs are for the application. So build packs essentially transform the deployed code into what they call slugs, which are then executed by their server instances, and they call the server instances dynos. So we need two build packs. The first one is going to be Python, because that's what we need for Django, and then the other one is Node. So Python is the main server, so we actually run this application on a Python server, but we still need Node to actually bundle the front end, which is actually React. But so we'll just need to configure our backend slightly to be able to accommodate that. But to tell Heroku what those build packs are, remember we've configured this as a Heroku app. We used our repository. So we're going to say Heroku build packs, and then we say :set, and then the type of build pack. So that is basically just Heroku / and then it would be Python or Node.js. So we just say Python, and then that basically does what it says it does. And then there you can see it says the build pack is set, and then on the next release it'll use that Heroku Python as one of the build packs. And then the second one we need to add is the Node.js one. So we say Heroku build packs again, and then we say :add, because we're adding another build pack, and this time you have to set the index. So this is the first build pack, so we say index1 Heroku / Node.js. And if you add that, then it's going to add Node as the build pack with an index of 1. And if you need more information on this, then you can actually just Google multiple build packs, and you'll see some of Heroku's documentation on how to set that up. So now you can see it's set both of our build packs there, Heroku Node.js and Python. And so now we need to start configuring this repository to accommodate how it actually needs to be set out for Heroku. So that means that this front end folder, we're going to need to unpack a little bit by bringing these files into the main repository. So I'm just moving everything into it like this, and I'm going to delete the front end folder now. And then I'm going to bring the .vs code, and the source I'm going to have to rename, the requirements we need to bring as well. And then this source folder I'm going to rename as JD React Django. So we know that this is basically the home of our backend. So we just bring that back in here. Then we can delete our backend folder. I'm going to delete this thumbnail.png as well, so we don't need that. And then we actually need to unpack everything inside the JD React Django folder as well. So all of these folders and files that are constituting the Django application itself, we need to bring that into this repository as well. So this is basically one application. You can find the manage.py file in it, the database, our Django apps, and the front end. So now we can delete the JD React Django folder. So you've got .vs code, which we'll need to actually specify in the git ignore. So we just specify that. And then you've got the articles, which is one of our apps, the API itself, the DJ React, which houses our settings. You've got the public folder, which is what will actually be served. So this is a very important folder we'll need to specify in our templates. Then you've got the source folder, which is the React application, and then all the other files that are just in support of all that. And so what I want to do now is I'm just going to close that, bring this down a bit, and we need to go into the package.json file. And inside here, we need to specify another thing inside it. So this is the engines key. So we specify engines, and this is basically just defining what version of Node it needs to use and what version of NPM it needs to use. So if you want to find that out, then you can just say node-v, and then you'll see you get version 9.5, well, at least on mine. So that would be the version that I would put here, because we know that it's been working this whole time using this version. So that's quite important. You don't want to specify just any version. So here I'm going to add node and then set the version as 9.5.0. And then we also want to do npm-v to get the npm version. That's 6.4.1, so we add that as well. So npm and 6.4.1. And so that will basically just tell the build pack to install those exact versions. And that's important because we know that these versions the application works for. And so then with that, we need to create another file in this folder, which is the proc file. Now the proc file is a file specifically used in Heroku apps, and essentially it's just sort of like a configuration file. So it doesn't take an extension, so we just say proc file, and you can see how VS Code is recognizing that. So it's giving us the Heroku emblem there on the side. And inside here, we just need to specify two things. So the first is this release statement, and that is Python manage.py migrate. The second thing to add in here is the web process. So on the left is the process type, on the right is the actual command. So for web, this is where we want to use a service that can actually serve the application. And for Python applications, we use you can normally use gunicorn. So to actually use gunicorn, you just have to type gunicorn and then the project folder and the path to the WSGI file. So this would be inside DJ React to our WSGI file. So we just say DJ React.WSGI and then just say --log-file and then a space and then another dash. And then we're good to go. So the release is basically just saying that every time we release the application, so actually upload everything, then it will call this Python manage.py migrate. And that's obviously important for the database migration. We need that, otherwise the server won't actually work. And then the web process is regarded as a special process. So that's essentially the only one that allows for HTTP traffic to enter it. And that's where you'll specify the command that actually runs your application. So whether this was Java or Ruby or whatever you're using, then this command ensures that you actually can run a web server. And so with that, we can then close that off. And inside our requirements.txt, here we want to specify a couple things that will actually be installed on the build pack. So already we've got our Django requirements here, but we also need to add gunicorn. So let's add this here. And I'm going to specify the version as 19.7.1. And then the last thing that we need is white noise. So white noise basically helps to serve static files. And then gunicorn is the HTTP server. So white noise I'm going to add as well as one of the packages and specify the version as 3.3.1 as well. And so those are our Django requirements. So I can close that. Again, Heroku will actually look for this file specifically. So that's why it needs to be here. Same with the proc file and the package.json file and the manage.py, because we specified that in the proc file. So that's why these files needed to be here in the first place. And then lastly, we also need to add another file for the Python version. So here we just say runtime.txt, and that also needs to be in this folder because Heroku will look for it. And we need to specify Python 3.6.6 at the specific time. That is the most recent version. So if there is a later version, then I'm confident that you'd need to use the latest version, but Heroku will give you an error if it doesn't, if it's not working with the version you've specified. So for now, this should be good. So we just need to specify that. We can close that now. And then we'll just need to configure our white noise to actually serve those static files. So let's go into our settings in DJ React, and we can just toggle that for now. And if we go all the way to the bottom to our static files here, so here you've got static URL. I'm going to add the static root as well. So I'll say static root, and this is going to use os.path.join the base directory, which is defined at the top, with a folder which we'll call static files. And then we will also specify the static files storage, and this is where white noise comes in. So here we just specify this inside a quote, and we say white noise.django.gzip manifest static. Let's make sure we spell this right. Static files storage. So gzip is basically a compression or a way of compressing static files. So if we just make sure here, so white noise.django gzip manifest static files storage. So that's what needs to go inside our settings.py. And then we'll also need to add it to our WSGI as well. So in here, right below this import, I'm just going to add another import, which is going to come from white noise.django, and we'll say import Django white noise. And then using this application, which is calling the get WSGI application, we're going to call another application and say that is equal to Django white noise of the application. So like that. So we're passing in the old application into this and re-specifying it as the application to be used. And then to actually serve this or allow this to be served in the Django project, we need to add it to our allowed hosts. So in here, it's going to be the actual URL to the project, which if you take your app name, so that for mine would be just Django React Django app dot Heroku app.com. So that will be the project URL. And with that, we are all set to go. So if we just say git add, and just make sure that we're not adding unnecessary files. So, okay, so we just had a little bit of an error with the Git repositories clashing with each other. So I'm just going to reinitialize this with all these files here. So we say git init, and then I'm going to come and add the Heroku Remote. So we add that there. And now we just have to say git add. So we'll add everything. And then we just say commit, paste that there, and it will commit all those files. And then say push Heroku master. So execute that. And now we see if everything worked. So you can see it says building resource, installing the libraries, where it's reading from the package JSON file. So you can see node npm with those versions. Okay, so on this first try, we see we got quite a few errors. So the first one is the no module of all auth. So we obviously didn't specify that in our requirements.txt, so we'll need to recheck that now. Then we've got this python manage.py collect static error, and I'm going to just perform the recommended thing here, which is to disable collect static. So I'm just going to set that there, and so now that should be taken care of. But now let's just list everything out, and I'm going to say pip freeze, and this will go into requirements2.txt. And when we check everything in here, okay, we're getting a massive file. So that's because we don't actually have a virtual environment installed. So what I'm going to do is create one now. We'll say virtual env, and I'm going to specify in the git ignore to ignore that. So let's actually just fix that there. Node modules as well. And so we're just going to activate that as well. So source env bin activate. I'm going to say pip install Django, and I'm going to actually run the application so we can see what other packages we need to make sure that we include. So we don't have all auth, so let's do that. We'll say pip install Django all auth, and if we run the server again, we get course headers. So we say pip install course headers, and I think that is most likely Django course headers, or there we go. So course headers is installed now. If we run the server again, we get rest auth. So same kind of errors here, and we actually install this. So pip install Django rest auth. And now if we try that again, so run the server, now it's saying no module named white noise. So we'll install that, pip install white noise, and I'm going to make it 3.3.1, and then we'll need to install G-Unicorn, so pip install G-Unicorn, and we'll make it 19.7.1. There we go. Now if we say run the server, let's check if this works. So now we just have that migrations error, which is fine. And we can say pip freeze and go to requirements.txt, and we can delete that number 2 as well. So now if we execute that, we check requirements.txt, then this should be everything that we need for the application. So we can close all of this, and actually while we're at it, we'll actually specify the template directory in our settings.py. So if we go down to the templates here, what we want to do is we want to link our build directory, which will come from our public once we call npm run build. So let's actually do that. We'll say npm, and actually we'll need to say npm install before we do that. Basically what we want to do is link the build directory, which is the built version of our create React app, and link that to our directories folder. So what we do is we say os.path.join base directory with build, and so then we're getting this found one high severity vulnerability. So I'm going to say npm audit fix, so that we make sure that that's not a problem. And now we can say npm run build as well. And what we can do is specify in the package JSON file, we can specify another script here, which will call the build process as soon as the application has been installed. And that's also what we would like for our Heroku app, so that once we've actually pushed everything to the repository and it's been installed with Node, then our script will run to create the build directory, which can then be served. So here we just have to add post install, and this will be npm run build. So post install meaning after the install command has been called, so npm I, then it will call npm run build. Now here you can see the build directory has been created. You've got the static files, and then you've got the index.html, and this is where our application is being run from, well, the front end. So we want that index.html to be the file that is essentially referenced in every single URL path of the Django application. So in our URLs, if we go to here, what we want to do is specify another path, and so we're going to need a regular expression path as well, actually. So we'll say regular expression path from Django URLs, and if we come in here and say path, or rather regular expression path, and the regular expression is looking for any URL that is navigated to. And when we navigate to the URL on the front end, it's still being served on the Python server. So if we didn't have this regular expression path, then what would happen is if we navigated to, let's say, the login path, then it wouldn't recognize that path. Yes, it's being recognized in the front end, but it's not being recognized in the Django server. So that's why we need the regular expression path to call the template view, which will essentially display the index.html, and the JavaScript will kick in to display the correct view itself. So what we need to do is import from django.views.generic and say import template view, and this is just a shortcut, so we just say template view.asView because it's a class-based view, and the parameter that goes in here is the template name, and the template name is essentially the actual template that we want to display, and that is index.html. And the reason why we can say that is because in our settings we joined the base directory with the build directory. So by calling template view and specifying the template name as index.html, we're essentially referencing this index.html in the build folder, which will be taken care of thanks to the JavaScript in the static here, this built JavaScript file. So with that, we can try and actually add this to our Heroku repository again. So I'm going to say git add. Okay, so before running it, there's just 2 errors that I've picked up which took unbelievably long to actually figure out. So if you start by renaming your proc file with a lowercase p or just mispronouncing it, you can end up getting a UTF-8 error, which means that even if you rename the file back to the correct file name, so with a capital P, you could find yourself in the same predicament as I was, which is basically that it's telling you that your proc file does not have any web or release processes defined, which basically means that your application gets an error and it's asking you to check your logs to see what the problem is, but it keeps telling you that the proc file is mispronounced even though you've committed to the repository. So if you're getting that error, the only way that you fix it is literally by removing the repository, deleting the app, recreating the app, and reinitializing your repository. So that's the only way that I've seen to figure it out. Once you've got the proc file renamed the correct way, then what you need to do is go into your settings file and add the static files directory, which is stating the path in the build folder and the static folder inside there. So basically what that means is it's going to use those static files as the static files of the application, and that's very important. So once you've got that, we can then actually add everything to the repository. So we'll say git add, and then we'll say git commit. We'll just make a note here and just say final, hopefully, and then just say git push, and we'll see if this all works. Okay, so after all of that, let's just take a look and see what all of the commands were that showed here in the console. So the first build process that we specified was for Node.js, so that's why it's saying Node.js app detected, specifying all of those environment modules, verbose settings there, and then it's looking for the engines node and npm, which is coming from the package.json file that we specified. Then we see the React scripts being called, and that's because of the specification that we've made in our package.json, which is that after the install has actually taken place, then it runs npm run build. And then if we just check here again, so it's running those scripts to create the build directory. Then we see that it's actually using gzip to build that and store it in the build folder, which is right here. Then we see it's checking our Python app next, so that's the second build that we specified. So it's installing the requirements with pip, and then we see the proc files declaring the types that it found, so the processes, and then it's just compressing, launching, and then actually migrating afterwards as well. So we see all of that take place. And now if we just open this up in a browser, so let's go inside here, and if we just paste that URL in there, and we see that it's actually loading. We see that if we click on login, it navigates us, everything works, except one thing, our data isn't coming through, and if we inspect, we get a couple of errors that are showing here, and that's partially because if we check here, we get this 127, which is our local host. So those errors are coming through actually because we didn't specify a build production in our Django application to call the URL as the Heroku URL, so this URL, instead of the localhost. Now that's not a huge fix, so I'm not going to go into that and show how to fix that because it's just the URL, but everything is working so far. So this is basically just an introduction to how you can set it up with Heroku and just get everything up and running. So basically just combining React and Django, which in my opinion is a really good combination. And you can see that even with the small errors that we just had to adjust for, it's actually a pretty easy setup that we had to go through. And once you've got all this working, then you can just go into your Heroku app and you can add a domain to that as well if you want. The other thing is that if you are a student, you can actually apply for GitHub Education, for the GitHub Education program, and that's something that I'm using myself as well. So basically what it entails is that you get access to a whole lot of different packages that are normally either really expensive or that just have some really premium package to it. So there's a lot of things. Heroku is actually one of them now, one of the more recent additions that they've added. So if you are a student and you can prove an email address showing that you are a student, then you can gain access to that education platform. You can get free credits to a whole bunch of services, and I believe you can get a free Dyno as well on Heroku, which is quite nice. I think that's for a year. So that also goes hand in hand with this tutorial. So if you're a student, you can gain access to that and get that sorted as well. So otherwise, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a comment down below. Let us know what you think. And if there's anything else you want to see, particularly in this tutorial series with Django and React, leave a comment down below. Other than that, thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.